So, we're going to do this franchise ranking, but I have to ask, how did the Friday the 13th movies become so absolutely prolific and get put on the same pedestal uh, for classic horror and these classic 70s and 80s films as franchises like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Like, the best of these films is worse than they don't hold a candle to the best films from those series. But if this is your favorite franchise for some reason, I'm sorry. Um, we're gonna be a little hateful on this ranking. This is probably the hardest one that I've had to make it through yet. I hadn't seen all of these movies previously. I had actually only seen a few. Uh, and I didn't realize how boring some of these movies are. They're not, don't get me wrong. There's only one really bad movie, but there's a lot of just tough to make it through slogs. Anyway, start the countdown. Coming in at number 12, the movie that all of you know what I'm going to say. And that's Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Not much to say about this movie. It's boring. It's bad. It doesn't hardly take place in Manhattan itself. It takes place on a boat for the most part. It is kind of in Manhattan. So he didn't really take Manhattan. He walked into Manhattan and then walked onto a boat. And I cannot get past how just absolutely trash this movie is. The kills are lame. The premise is lame. The acting is the same as always. Yeah, bad movie. Coming in at number 11 is Friday the 13th, Part 7, New Blood. And to be honest with you, out of all of these movies, this is the one movie after watching all of these that I literally cannot remember a single thing about. And I was going to refresh my memory before doing this ranking, but I thought it would be better to come on here and just be like, you know what? This movie was so boring and so ineffective that it left zero memory in my brain about what this movie was about. It wasn't. I don't remember it being bad so much as I just don't care to remember, apparently. And yeah, that's all there is to New Blood. And coming in at number 10 is a movie that takes a baby step in the right direction, a baby step. And that is Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. And how this movie takes a baby step is that there's actually a couple of interesting parts to this film. There's some good actors in this film, but overall it is still the boring, everyday mess that these movies are. I think my favorite scene in this was actually when Jason transfers from one body to another at one point, and then the old body starts melting away. That was my favorite scene. It was actually pretty wicked, and the whole concept of him being some almost possessive demonic force jumping between bodies. If this wasn't a Friday the 13th movie, I think that this would have been a better movie overall if they wouldn't have tried to make it a Jason film, and that way they could have made it a little bit less boring, with better dialogue and better characters, instead of trying to make it a Friday the 13th trope movie. But otherwise, it had a few little pieces and parts that were pretty fun. As for number 9, and this is something that a lot of you probably won't agree with, and that is perfectly fine. But this movie is not a good movie. It is barely an okay movie, and that is the original Friday the 13th in 1980. And I understand that, this started the franchise, but what franchise? It started a very lame franchise with very. Here's the thing: when you make a horror film, something about it has to be interesting. The kills in these films are not interesting, most of them. Very few kills in any of these movies are interesting for the most part. And you have to make something has to be interesting. So the kills aren't interesting. The main protagonists, and I call them protagonists just because they're the people getting slaughtered, but they don't do anything to be protagonists. They're just teenagers acting like teenagers with the cardboard cutout, no character, no nothing. And Jason isn't that interesting. And this movie doesn't even have Jason in it. It's his mama, and which is okay, but this movie's just not fun. It's not interesting. There's no good dialogue. I don't get it. I don't understand how this movie became the hit that it was. All right, now with number 8 is Friday the 13th Part 3. And this is where they have some slightly better characters. The biker gang that's in this is a little bit interesting, not overly interesting in any way. But the best scene in this film is probably the beginning scene where he's walking through the clothes up on the clotheslines, and with the husband and wife, that whole scene. The 3D aspect is pretty lame in this film, but overall it's another Friday the 13th film and pretty boring overall. But yeah, Part 3. Now, I will say that you can see, at least with the first, probably 6 films in this franchise, that the way that they shoot the movies slowly changes and develops, and they get different styles in how they shoot these films. And this one, you can tell a lot of the shots were filmed so that they could do the 3D aspect in it, but there are also parts in this film that are shot really neat, and I'll give it that. And it had a couple of slightly more interesting characters in it. And at number 7, and this is a movie that is not a good movie, but it is entertaining. Now, it is this high up on the list because it is entertaining, but it is still not a good film. And that is Jason X. And now, I actually, if you gave me the choice of watching this and a couple of the ones above it multiple times, I would probably choose this film. I don't think that it is better than those films overall, but it is more entertaining than some of the films that I placed above it on this list. But Jason X, the space Jason in space film, is actually a very entertaining film that does have some mildly interesting characters uh, doing interesting things, and this is one that I actually had no trouble watching the entire film. This is actually one that I did get to see in theaters whenever it first came out as well. But I remembered not liking the movie when I was younger and seeing it, so I had never actually rewatched this until recently. And I actually really enjoyed it this time and kind of embraced what it was. And it's actually the end gets really goofy. I mean, really, the whole movie is pretty goofy, but this is a fun movie. All right, coming in at number 6 is Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, and this is the fourth movie in the series in the franchise, and this is the beginning of the Tommy trilogy, which I actually think is some of the better movies in this entire franchise. And this one, with the young Tommy and him making his different horror masks, and this reclusive, not really reclusive, but this family that lives out in the middle of nowhere, really close to Crystal Lake. Um, this is where they are trying to build um, a more steady cast, or at least a more steady characters towards the franchise, or at least a single steady character towards the franchise. And I think that they did a pretty good job with this. Most of the other characters, I don't like it when, especially when the female cast members' only job is really to either A, be naked, or B, run around and scream, and don't really have any interesting lines, anything interesting that they're doing. This one of the sisters, I can't remember her name, but the one that survives with Tommy the longest, has a little bit better role in this than most female characters in this series, in this franchise, and I do like that a little bit better. But overall, still not quite to that level of being a good movie. This is an okay movie. And here we are at number 5. And this is where I actually am like, okay, these are actually pretty decent movies. This is a decent film. And that is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. This is the third film in the Tommy trilogy. And this one does not necessarily have any great dialogue or anything like that, in my opinion, and the acting is decent. It's not terrible, but what makes this movie really entertaining is it has over-the-top action, which I feel like might have been needed in a lot of these other films. But yes, this just has over-the-top action, the car chase scenes, and which made this just a great film. And it's the conclusion of the Tommy character, and yeah, it is a fun movie to watch. It is still has parts that are a slog to get through, just like everything below it. But yeah, overall, decent film. All right, and here we are at number 4, and this is where I will say that now these are, from here on, these are what I would consider good movies. Not necessarily fantastic, but good movies. And at number 4, we have Friday the 13th, Part 2. And what was really interesting to me about this film is I liked the evolution of um, how it was shot. So the way that they shot the first film, moving to this second film, there's a lot more like free flow cameras. Um, the way that they're following characters is a lot more uh, dynamic and interesting. Um, the main protagonist, the final girl in this, is actually an interesting character, and it's one of the few times that we get a female lead character in these films that has a little bit of substance to her instead of just a doll. Yeah, a doll. And I actually really enjoy this film. Um, I think that, and then, Jason doesn't have the mask yet. He has the bag over his head, and it's the first film with Jason in it. Um, yeah, and then the final chase scene is actually fantastic in this film, and then the whole, you know, her using her psychology techniques on him at the end to like make him uh, kind of to like take control of the situation. I really actually like this film. It feels like there's more substance to this film than a lot of the other ones, and which is why that is has put it as high on the list as I have it. And coming in at number 3, this film, in my opinion, is the only film that Jason is actually kind of terrifying in. And not in the, oh my god, I'm actually scared watching this, but in the, holy crap. Like, the sound engineering, the way that it is shot when it's following Jason. This is one of the few times that you actually see characters actually like seeing Jason, and kind of following him a little bit, or you know that sort of thing, instead of him just like running up, like getting a free shot off on these people. But that is Friday the 13th, the remake in 2009, and I actually really like this film. This is another one that I actually saw in theaters, and I remembered liking it a little bit whenever I was younger, but it didn't really stick with me. But going through and watching all of these in order, I have to say that the remake, it was so good compared to a lot of the old ones that I know that they couldn't continue making films because of a lawsuit. But it was kind of a bummer that they made an actually good film. Like, I consider this to be a good film, a good horror slasher. Not, one of the best ever made or anything, but a good one. And yeah, it's kind of a bummer that happened. Now that apparently there are rumors that they're finally making a new Friday the 13th film, and I hope that actually happens, and I hope that it brings some of the like drama and like actual fear that the Jason in this film was able to make me kind of feel for the characters, the empathy towards the characters that are being slaughtered in this film is there a lot more than a lot of these other films. And coming in at number 2, and that is Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. And this is the 5th movie in the series, and it is the 2nd movie in the Tommy trilogy. And this film, even though it is the only one, or it's one of 2 that actually that Jason is not the actual killer in. But this has some of the most fleshed out, original, interesting group of characters in it that compared to all the rest of these films. I don't understand how they got to the fifth film and achieved this and then just completely ditched it going forward, to have, you know, almost this Breakfast Club group of characters that, you know, there's somebody for there is somebody in this film for everybody to relate to in some way and or empathize with, and I think that makes this actually a fantastic film. It is so much more interesting to watch than almost any other film on this list that I don't get. If you're going to continue with the tropes, why didn't you continue with that trope? The best trope of them all in this entire franchise. They dropped the ball, man. They dropped the ball. And finally at number one, and it had to be because there is not a single movie on at the top of this list, at least, that can be anything at the top of the Nightmare on Elm Street list. And Freddy is just a far more interesting character than Jason. So, the number one film in this is Freddy vs. Jason. But saying that, I have to say that A New Beginning is a fantastic film. The Friday the 13th, 2009 is a really good film. And then Friday the 13th Part 2 is a good film that should have continued and made this an actual good franchise, but unfortunately I don't think overall this is a very good franchise. If I had to rank this franchise as a whole, I'd probably put it at a D. This is a D tier franchise overall. But yeah, Freddy vs. Jason, it's a fantastic film. I can watch it anytime, anywhere, with anybody. Doesn't matter. I will watch that movie anytime. I love the Freddy vs. Jason film. And yeah, it's the best Friday the 13th film. Anyway, if you enjoyed this ranking, please leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, that's okay too. Leave your hate in the comments and let me know. Anyway, y'all have a good night, and I'll see you later.